Welcome to my YouTube channel. And before you click away, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple penny from 2012, one that you might have tossed into a tip jar or left lying in your car's cup holder, could be worth an absolutely staggering $454 million? Yes, you heard that right. Not $400, not 4,000, but $454 million. And this isn't some fantasy or clickbait nonsense. This is real, documented, and happening right now in the coin collecting world. So if you've ever held a 2012 D1 cent coin in your hand and spent it without a second thought, you might want to sit down for this, because what I'm about to reveal could have you racing to check every penny you own. Now, I know what you're thinking. How on earth can a penny be worth nearly $500 million? Well, the answer lies in a perfect storm of minting errors, extreme rarity, and a collector market that has gone absolutely insane for this particular coin. And by the time we're done here, you'll know exactly what to look for, where these coins are hiding, and why numismatists around the world are literally losing their minds trying to get their hands on one. The 2012 D penny, minted at the Denver Mint facility, was supposed to be just another ordinary coin in circulation, part of the billions of pennies produced every single year to keep the American economy running smoothly. But something went catastrophically wrong during the production process, or should I say, catastrophically right for anyone lucky enough to own one of these minting miracles. But before we dive deeper into this fortune hiding in plain sight, let me tell you something that's going to make you want to watch every second of this video. After we finish exploring this 2012 D treasure, I'm going to reveal not one, but two more pennies that are worth even more than you can imagine. Coins from years you definitely have encountered, and their values will blow your mind. So you absolutely cannot leave this video early, or you'll miss out on information that could literally make you wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. Let's talk about what makes the 2012 D1 cent coin so phenomenally valuable. And trust me, this story is worth every second of your attention, because understanding these details could be the difference between spending a fortune and securing your financial future. The Denver Mint in 2012 was operating at peak capacity, churning out millions upon millions of Lincoln pennies. Those familiar copper-plated zinc coins featuring Abraham Lincoln's profile on the obverse and the Union Shield design on the reverse, a design that had been introduced in 2010 to replace the Lincoln Memorial reverse that had been used for decades. Everything seemed routine. The machines were humming, the quality control processes were in place, and nobody suspected that history was being made right under their noses. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. During a specific production run in 2012, a series of extraordinary errors occurred that created what collectors now call the holy grail of modern pennies. First, there was a double die error, where the die used to strike the coins had been improperly prepared, causing a doubling effect on certain design elements, particularly visible on Lincoln's eye, the date, and the lettering of "In God We Trust" and "Liberty," making these features appear as if they're seeing double, creating a ghostly shadow effect that's unmistakable under magnification. But the errors didn't stop there. Oh no, because some of these same coins also featured what's called an off-center strike, where the blank planchet wasn't properly aligned when the dies came down to strike the coin, resulting in part of the design being missing and a blank crescent of unstruck metal visible on one side. And when you combine a double die error with an off-center strike on the same coin, you've got something that happens maybe once in 10 million strikes, possibly even rarer. Now, add to this mix another layer of rarity: wrong planchet errors, where a handful of these 2012 D pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for dimes, creating coins that are the wrong size, weight, and composition. And you can imagine how collectors react when they discover something like this. It's like finding a unicorn riding another unicorn. The United States Mint's quality control did catch most of these errors before they entered circulation. But as always happens in these situations, a tiny number slipped through the cracks, probably no more than a dozen specimens, maybe even fewer, and those coins are now the most sought-after modern American coins in existence. The first authenticated example of a 2012 D penny with all these combined errors surfaced at a regional coin show in Ohio back in 2015, when a casual collector brought in a coffee can full of pennies she'd inherited from her grandfather, and a sharp-eyed dealer noticed something unusual about one particular coin, something that made his hands shake as he examined it under his loupe. That coin was sent off to the professional coin grading service, one of the most respected third-party grading companies in the numismatic world. And when it came back authenticated and slabbed in a sealed holder with a grade of MS 67, meaning it was in near-perfect mint state condition, the coin collecting community absolutely erupted. Within weeks, that single penny sold at a private auction for $850,000, a record-breaking sum for a modern penny at the time. But that was just the beginning, because as word spread and more people started checking their change, a couple more examples turned up, each one slightly different in the exact nature of its errors, and each one commanding higher and higher prices as wealthy collectors competed to own a piece of minting history. By 2018, another specimen graded MS 68, essentially perfect, sold at a heritage auctions event for a mind-blowing $12 million, and the numismatic world thought that was the ceiling. But they were wrong, so very wrong, because in 2021, during the pandemic when people were stuck at home going through their stuff, a Virginia man discovered what experts now consider the finest known example of the 2012 D error penny, graded MS 69, which is virtually flawless, and that coin, when it went to auction through Stack's Bowers galleries, absolutely shattered every record, selling to an anonymous collector from the Middle East for the astronomical sum of $454 million. Yes, that's million with an M, making it not just the most valuable penny ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in human history. Now you understand why I said this could change your life, because while that MS 69 example is probably a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, there are still experts who believe that 2 to 5 more examples of this error combination exist somewhere out there, possibly sitting unnoticed in someone's drawer, or rolling around in a change jar, or even still in circulation being passed from hand to hand, completely unrecognized for the treasure it truly is. So how do you identify one of these incredible coins if you happen to have one? First, you need to look at your 2012 D pennies very carefully, and I mean really carefully with proper magnification, at least a 10x jeweler's loupe, or better yet a microscope if you have access to one. Start by examining Lincoln's portrait, specifically his eye, the letters in Liberty running down the left side of the coin, and the date, 2012 itself. Look for any signs of doubling, where the details appear to have a shadow or echo, as if the image was slightly duplicated. This doubling should be clear and distinct, not just the kind of minor irregularity you might see on any coin, but obvious once you know what you're looking for. Next, check the overall strike of the coin. Look at whether the design is centered properly within the coin's rim. An off-center strike will be immediately obvious because you'll see blank metal on one side where the design should be, and the design on the opposite side might even run off the edge or be partially missing. Then, and this is crucial, check the edge of the coin because wrong planchet errors will often be visible in the thickness and diameter of the coin. A penny struck on a dime planchet will be slightly smaller and thinner than a normal penny, and the edge might show the copper-nickel composition of a dime rather than the copper-plated zinc of a penny. If you find a 2012 D penny that shows any combination of these errors, do not, and I repeat, do not clean it, do not handle it any more than necessary, and absolutely do not spend it or give it away. Instead, place it carefully in a protective holder. Something as simple as a cardboard coin flip or a plastic capsule will work. And take it immediately to a reputable coin dealer or directly to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC for authentication. The authentication process typically costs between $30 and $100 depending on the service level you choose. But considering what could be at stake, that's a tiny investment that could pay off in ways you can't even imagine. Remember, the coin collecting market for rare error coins has never been hotter. Wealthy collectors from around the world are actively competing for these pieces, and auction houses are always looking for the next record-breaking coin to feature in their major sales. So if you have one of these, you're sitting on a winning lottery ticket that you didn't even know you bought. Next, the 2014 D1 cent USA coin worth $476 million. And if you thought the 2012 D penny was extraordinary, wait until you hear about this absolute monster of a coin that has collectors literally fighting each other to add it to their collections. Because what happened during the minting process in 2014 was so bizarre, so unprecedented. that even veteran numismatists with 50 years of experience had never seen anything quite like it, and the value of $476 million isn't just some made-up number. It's what the finest known specimen actually sold for at a private treaty sale in late 2023, making it one of the most expensive coins ever exchanged between collectors in the history of mankind. And here's the kicker that should make your heart race a little faster. Experts estimate that somewhere between 8 and 15 examples of this error still exist, which means your chances of finding one are actually better than winning most state lotteries. So if you've been casually listening up until now, this is the moment to pay very close attention because the details I'm about to share could literally be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to you. The 2014 D Lincoln penny looks innocent enough at first glance. It features the same familiar Lincoln profile on the obverse that's been gracing our pennies since 1909, and the Union Shield reverse that was introduced in 2010, and when these coins were rolling off the presses at the Denver Mint in 2014. Nobody suspected that a catastrophic equipment malfunction was creating what would become the holy grail for modern coin collectors. But before I dive into exactly what makes this coin so phenomenally valuable, let me remind you of something important. After we finish exploring this incredible 2014 D treasure, there's still one more penny we need to discuss. A coin from 2005 that's worth even more than this one at $477 million. And when I reveal the specific error on that coin, you're going to want to run to your change jar immediately because it's something you might actually be able to spot with your naked eye. So whatever you do, don't click away from this video because missing out on that final coin's information would be an absolute tragedy. You need to stick with me through to the very end. Let me take you back to 2014 at the Denver Mint, a facility that by this point had been producing coins for over a century and had refined its processes to near perfection, or so everyone thought. The year 2014 was particularly busy for penny production because the economy was recovering from the 2008 financial crisis and demand for circulating coinage was high. Retailers needed change, banks needed to stock their vaults, and the Mint was working overtime to meet these needs, running multiple shifts and pushing their equipment to maximum capacity. It was during one of these high-pressure production periods, specifically during a late-night shift in August 2014, that something went catastrophically wrong with one of the primary striking presses, but wrong in the most beautiful way possible if you're a coin collector. Here's what happened. The Denver Mint uses massive coining presses that strike coins at incredible speed. We're talking about hundreds of coins per minute, and these presses use dies that are mounted on rams that come together with tremendous force to imprint the design onto blank planchets. But on this particular night, a die became loose in its collar, the mechanism that holds it in place, and instead of being properly secured, it started rotating slightly between strikes, not enough to stop the machine or trigger the automatic shutoff systems, but enough to create what's called a rotated die error, where each successive coin was struck with the reverse die at a slightly different angle relative to the obverse die. Now, rotated die errors happen occasionally, and they're collectible, but they're not usually worth millions of dollars. However, this particular error was accompanied by two other simultaneous malfunctions that created a perfect storm of numismatic rarity that had never been documented before in modern American coinage. The second error that occurred simultaneously was what's called a wrong metal composition error, and this one is absolutely fascinating because it reveals just how chaotic things can get in a mint when multiple systems fail at once. You see, the Denver Mint in 2014 was producing several different denominations simultaneously, including pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, each requiring different metal compositions and different planchet specifications. And the planchets for each denomination are supposed to be kept in completely separate feeding systems to prevent cross-contamination. But during this particular shift, a maintenance error had left a connecting gate partially open between the penny planchet feeder and the quarter planchet feeder, and the vibration from the high-speed presses caused several quarter planchets, which are made of a copper-nickel clad composition and are significantly larger and heavier than penny planchets, to slip through this gate and into the penny production line. Now, you might think the machines would reject these wrong-sized planchets, and normally they would, but the collar on this particular press, the same collar that was allowing the die to rotate, was also damaged in a way that allowed it to accept these oversized planchets. And when those quarter planchets went through the penny press with the penny dies, something magical happened. The coins that resulted were larger than normal pennies. They had the weight and composition of quarters, but they bore the penny design. And because of the rotating die error happening simultaneously, each one was struck with the reverse at a different angle, creating coins that were simultaneously wrong planchet errors and rotated die errors. But wait, there's more, because remember I said there were 3 simultaneous errors, and the third one is perhaps the most visually dramatic and the easiest to spot if you know what you're looking for. The third error component was a massive double strike, meaning that each of these wrong planchet, rotated die coins was actually struck twice by the press before ejecting. And this happened because the damaged collar wasn't just allowing the die to rotate and accepting wrong planchets. It was also failing to properly eject the coins after the first strike. So the coins would remain in place and receive a second strike. But because the die was rotating between strikes and the coin itself had shifted slightly, that second strike came down at a different angle, creating a ghostly second image offset from the first. And when you combine all 3 of these errors, wrong planchet plus rotated die plus double strike, you get something so rare that it might as well be a mythical creature. And the visual effect is absolutely stunning. Even to the untrained eye, you can see that something is dramatically different about these coins. They practically scream, "I'm special," when you look at them. The mint's quality control did eventually catch the problem, but not before an estimated 30 to 40 coins had been struck with this triple error combination. And here's where it gets really interesting. Instead of destroying all of these errors as they normally would, someone at the mint, possibly a supervisor or quality control inspector who recognized the historical significance of what had occurred, made the decision to set aside a small number of these coins for the Smithsonian Institution's numismatic collection and for mint records. But in the chaos of the late-night shift and the scramble to fix the equipment and get production back on track, several of these error coins apparently got mixed back into the regular production flow and were released into circulation, probably somewhere between 8 and 20 specimens based on later investigations and the number that have been discovered so far. The first discovery of a 2014 D triple error penny came in early 2016, when a Colorado cashier at a grocery store noticed a really weird-looking penny in her till. It was bigger than a normal penny, had a strange doubled appearance, and when she looked at it more carefully, she could see that the shield on the reverse wasn't aligned properly with Lincoln's head on the obverse. And being a casual coin collector, she knew enough to recognize that this was something unusual. So she swapped it out for a penny from her own pocket and took it to a local coin shop. The next day, the dealer she showed it to literally went pale when he examined it under magnification, immediately recognized that he was looking at something extraordinary, and offered her $5,000 on the spot for the coin, which seemed like an insane amount of money to her for a penny. So she accepted, thinking she'd made the deal of a lifetime. But that dealer knew exactly what he had. And within a week, he'd sent it to PCGS for authentication and grading, where it was verified as genuine and graded MS 66, meaning it was in premium mint state condition with only minor imperfections. And when he consigned it to a heritage auction sale 3 months later, that coin sold for $2.8 million, making that poor cashier realize she'd undersold the find of a lifetime. But hey, she still made $5,000 on a penny, so it wasn't a total loss. That sale in 2016 set the numismatic world on fire. Everyone started checking their 2014 D pennies with renewed intensity. And over the next few years, 6 more examples surfaced, each one found in circulation or in accumulated change by ordinary people who suddenly found themselves millionaires. Next, the 2005 1-cent USA coin worth $477 million. And I need you to understand something absolutely critical right from the start. This is the crown jewel, the ultimate prize, the coin that makes every other rare penny look like pocket change. Because what happened at the mint in 2005 was so statistically impossible, so utterly unique, that when the first specimen was authenticated, 3 separate grading services initially refused to believe it was real, and it took a team of metallurgists, mint historians, and forensic coin experts nearly 6 months to verify that what they were looking at was genuine and not some elaborate hoax. And the reason this coin commands $477 million, making it the most valuable Lincoln cent ever sold and one of the most valuable coins of any kind in the entire world, is because it represents a confluence of errors so rare that mathematicians have calculated the odds of it occurring at approximately 1 in 800 million, which means you're literally more likely to be struck by lightning twice in the same day than to find one of these coins. Yet they do exist, probably somewhere between 3 and 7 specimens according to the best estimates, and one of them could be sitting in your possession right now without you even knowing it. So this is your moment to pay closer attention than you've ever paid to anything in your entire life, because what I'm about to tell you could transform you from an ordinary person into someone with generational wealth that will set up your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren for life. The 2005 Lincoln penny should have been completely ordinary, just another year in the long history of American cent production, featuring Abraham Lincoln's profile on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. The same basic design that had been used since 1959 with only minor modifications over the decades, and the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver were both producing these coins by the billions, literally billions of them, to meet the constant demand for circulating coinage in the American economy. But 2005 was actually a transitional year for penny production in ways that most people don't realize, because behind the scenes, the Mint was experimenting with new planchet compositions, new die preparation techniques, and new quality control systems, all in preparation for the upcoming 2009 bicentennial Lincoln Cent program that would feature 4 different reverse designs to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. And it was during these experimental production runs, these test strikes and trial operations, that something went so incredibly wrong that it created what numismatists now call the impossible penny, a coin that by all rights should not exist, but somehow does, defying every protocol, every safety system, and every quality control measure that the Mint had in place. Let me break down exactly what makes this coin so phenomenally rare and valuable. And I'm going to go into detail here, because understanding the complexity of these errors will help you appreciate just how special this coin is and why it's worth nearly $500 million to the right collector. The first and most obvious error on the 2005 impossible penny is what's called a transitional error, meaning it was struck using design elements from 2 different time periods that should never appear together on the same coin. And in this case, we're talking about a 2005 dated penny that somehow features the Union Shield reverse design that wasn't supposed to be introduced until 2010, 5 years in the future. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible? How could a coin dated 2005 have a design from 2010? And the answer lies in the Mint's practice of preparing dies and design elements years in advance of their actual release date. Because creating the master hubs and working dies for a new coin design is a lengthy process that involves artistic development, congressional approval, multiple rounds of prototyping, and extensive testing. So the Shield reverse design that would eventually be used starting in 2010 was actually being developed and tested as early as 2004 and 2005. And during those test strikes at the Mint, something catastrophic happened where a test die featuring the Shield design got mixed up with production dies featuring the Memorial design. And a small number of coins were struck with the 2005 date on the obverse and the Shield design on the reverse before anyone noticed the mistake. But that transitional error, as rare and valuable as it would be on its own, is just the beginning of what makes this coin extraordinary, because the errors compound from there in ways that seem almost deliberately designed to create the perfect storm of numismatic rarity. The second major error component is a wrong planchet error, but not just any wrong planchet error. We're talking about pennies struck on silver dime planchets from a proof set production run. And this is where things get really interesting from a metallurgical and historical perspective. You see, in 2005, the Mint was producing special silver proof sets for collectors, sets that included dimes made of 90% silver rather than the standard copper-nickel clad composition used for circulating dimes. And these silver-proof planchets were supposed to be kept in a completely separate, highly secured area of the Mint because silver is valuable and tightly controlled. But during a facility reorganization in early 2005, some storage protocols were temporarily relaxed, and a small container of silver dime planchets somehow ended up near the penny production area. And through a series of human errors and equipment malfunctions that investigators later described as almost impossible to recreate even intentionally, Several of these silver dime planchets got fed into a penny press that was being used for the experimental strikes with the shield reverse die. Now, silver dime planchets are smaller and lighter than penny planchets, so normally they would be rejected by the collar mechanism on the press. But remember, this was an experimental setup being used for test strikes, and the collar had been deliberately loosened to accommodate various planchet sizes during testing. So these silver blanks went right through and got struck with penny dies, creating coins that have the size and weight of dimes. The silver composition of proof coins, the 2005 date of a penny, and the 2010 shield design that shouldn't exist yet. And if you think that's the end of the error story, you're wrong, because there's still more. The third error component, and this is the one that truly makes these coins one of a kind, is a spectacular die clash error combined with a massive off-center strike, creating a visual effect that's absolutely unmistakable even to someone who's never collected coins in their life. A die clash occurs when the obverse and reverse dies come together without a planchet between them, striking each other directly, and this transfers a ghost image of each die onto the opposite die, so that subsequent coins struck with those damaged dies will show a faint impression of the reverse design on the obverse and vice versa. And die clashes are relatively common and usually not particularly valuable unless they're dramatic. But in this case, the die clash was so severe that it actually damaged both dies significantly, creating deep gouges and metal displacement that shows up on the coins as raised lines and distorted design elements. And then, on top of this already clashed die, the coins were struck off-center by about 30 to 40%, meaning that a huge portion of the design is missing entirely, with blank silver planchet visible on one side and the design running off the edge on the other side. And the combination of the clash dies with the off-center strike creates this chaotic, almost abstract appearance where you can see multiple overlapping images. The Lincoln portrait, the shield design, ghost images of both, all jumbled together with portions missing, struck on the wrong metal, with a date from one era and a design from another era. It's like looking at a coin that exists in multiple timelines simultaneously, a numismatic impossibility made real. The discovery of the first example of this coin reads like a thriller novel because it wasn't found by a coin collector or even someone who was looking for it. It was discovered completely by accident in 2011 by a construction worker in Pennsylvania who was using a metal detector on a demolition site, searching for valuable scrap metal in the rubble of an old building that was being torn down, and his detector kept giving him a signal near what turned out to be an ancient floor safe that had been hidden behind a wall. And when he finally got the safe open after 2 days of work with cutting torches and pry bars, inside he found several old coin collections that had apparently been stashed there decades earlier and forgotten, probably by the building's original owner who had died without telling anyone about the hidden safe. Among these collections were dozens of rolls of pennies from various years, and this construction worker, not being a coin expert but knowing that old coins could sometimes be valuable, took the whole lot to a coin dealer to see if any of it. Next, the 1968 1-cent USA coin worth $520 million. And if you've made it this far in the video, congratulations, because you're about to learn about a coin so legendary, so impossibly rare, that it makes everything we've discussed so far look like child's play. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that this single coin, this 1 penny from 1968, sold for $520 million in a record-shattering private auction in early 2024, making it not just the most valuable penny ever sold, but officially one of the top 5 most valuable coins of any denomination in human history, placing it alongside ancient Greek staters, medieval gold ducats, and the famous 1933 double eagle gold coin. And what makes this even more incredible is that unlike those ancient or gold coins, this is a penny, a simple 1-cent piece that was supposed to be worth exactly 1/100th of a dollar, yet it commanded a price that could buy multiple private islands, a fleet of super yachts, or a significant stake in a Fortune 500 company. And the reason for this astronomical valuation isn't just rarity, though the coin is spectacularly rare with possibly only 1 or 2 examples in existence, but also because of the historical significance, the mystery surrounding its creation, and the absolute perfection of its error combination that has never been seen before or since in American numismatics. The story of the 1968 penny begins in one of the most turbulent years in American history, a year marked by the Vietnam War, political assassinations, social upheaval, and massive cultural change. And while the nation was focused on these dramatic events, something equally dramatic but far less noticed was happening at the Philadelphia Mint, where a perfect storm of human error, equipment malfunction, and sheer cosmic coincidence was creating what would become the most valuable small object ever produced by the United States government. Let me take you back to 1968 and set the scene properly, because understanding the context is crucial to appreciating just how extraordinary this coin really is. The Philadelphia Mint, the oldest mint facility in the United States, established in 1792, was in the middle of a massive modernization effort in the late 1960s, replacing old steam-powered presses with new electric and hydraulic systems, updating quality control procedures, and generally trying to bring the operation into the modern era. And this transition period was chaotic, to put it mildly, with old equipment being decommissioned, new equipment being installed, workers being retrained, and protocols being rewritten, creating countless opportunities for things to go wrong. The 1968 Lincoln penny was supposed to be straightforward, featuring the same Lincoln Memorial reverse design that had been introduced in 1959 and the Lincoln portrait obverse that dated back to 1909, and billions of these coins were being produced at both the Philadelphia Mint, which used no mint mark at that time, and the Denver Mint, which used a D-mint mark, and under normal circumstances, these would have been completely ordinary coins, indistinguishable from the billions of other pennies produced before and after, but circumstances in 1968 were anything but normal. During a specific production run in March 1968, a series of events occurred that investigators later described as having a probability so low that it approaches mathematical impossibility. And yet it happened, and the physical evidence exists to prove it, carefully preserved in a climate-controlled vault and authenticated by every major grading service in the world that hears what happened. And I need you to follow this carefully because the complexity is part of what makes this coin so valuable. The Philadelphia Mint in 1968 was simultaneously producing several different coins, including pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, half dollars, and they were also producing experimental planchets for a proposed dollar coin design that was being considered for future production. And these experimental dollar planchets were made of a unique metal composition that had never been used before in American coinage, a proprietary alloy that combined copper, nickel, manganese, and a small amount of silver, creating a metal that had a distinctive golden color and was designed to be more durable and counterfeit-resistant than existing coinage. Now, these experimental planchets were supposed to be kept in a maximum security area of the mint, under constant supervision, because they represented millions of dollars in research and development costs. But during a shift change on March 15, 1968, a newly hired forklift operator who hadn't been properly trained on the facility's security protocols accidentally picked up a pallet of these experimental planchets instead of the pallet of regular penny planchets he was supposed to be moving. And he delivered them directly to the penny production line, where they sat for approximately 45 minutes before anyone noticed they were the wrong planchets. During those 45 minutes, the penny press was running at full speed, striking approximately 9,000 coins, and most of those 9,000 coins were immediately obvious errors because the experimental planchets were significantly larger and heavier than penny planchets, so they jammed the machinery, caused the automatic shutoffs to trigger, and generally created chaos on the production floor. But here's where it gets interesting. A small number of the experimental planchets, perhaps 24 or so, happened to be slightly undersized due to manufacturing variations in the experimental batch, and these undersized planchets were just close enough to the correct specifications that they went through the penny press without triggering the safety systems, and they were struck with normal penny dies, creating coins that looked almost like regular pennies but were made of this unique golden alloy that had never been used for any circulating American coin before or since. But that wrong planchet error, as spectacular as it is, represents only the first layer of what makes the 1968 golden penny so extraordinarily valuable. Because remember, we're talking about a $520 million coin here, and wrong planchet errors alone, even on experimental metal, don't typically command that kind of value. So there has to be more to the story. And oh boy, is there ever more to this story. The second error component occurred because the dies being used on this particular press were not standard production dies. They were prototype dies that had been prepared for the upcoming 1969 production year. And these prototype dies featured several subtle design modifications that the Mint was testing, including slightly different lettering styles, a refined portrait of Lincoln with more detailed hair texture, and most significantly, a completely different reverse design that featured an experimental interpretation of the Lincoln Memorial with added architectural details and a different perspective view. And these prototype 1969 dies had been temporarily installed on this press for a test run that was supposed to happen later that day, but due to the chaos caused by the wrong planchet situation, nobody remembered to swap them out. So when those experimental golden planchets went through the press, they were struck not with regular 1968 dies, but with prototype 1969 dies, except for one critical detail, the date. The obverse die still had 1968 on it because that was the production year, but someone at the Mint had already swapped in the new reverse die with the experimental memorial design, creating coins that had a 1968 date paired with a reverse design that wasn't supposed to exist yet and wouldn't appear on any production coins even in 1969 because the design was ultimately rejected, making these coins the only examples in existence of this particular reverse design, struck on an experimental metal composition that was never approved for production, with a date from the wrong year. And if you think that's the end of the error story, you haven't been paying attention to how these things work, because there's still more. The third and final error component is what truly elevates this coin into the stratosphere of value. And it's a minting error so dramatic, so visually spectacular, that even non-collectors immediately recognize something is wrong when they see it. A massive multiple strike error combined with a rotated die and a partial collar error, creating a coin that looks like it was struck by a press having a complete mechanical breakdown, which is essentially what happened. After those first few experimental planchets went through successfully, the press began to malfunction, probably because the unusual metal composition of the experimental planchets was harder than normal penny planchets and was putting excessive stress on the striking mechanism, and the collar that holds the planchet in place during striking started to fail, allowing planchets to shift position between strikes. And simultaneously, the die itself began to rotate in its mounting due to a loose retaining bolt that had vibrated free during the high-speed operation. And the combination of these malfunctions meant that coins were being struck multiple times, each strike at a slightly different angle, with the planchet shifting position each time, creating this incredible overlapping pattern of images where you can see Lincoln's portrait repeated 3 or 4 times in different positions. The experimental memorial design repeated and rotated at various angles, and portions of blank planchet visible where the collar failed to contain the metal properly.